It's good to have Kyle Jolliffe from Toronto and Diane Lapis from New York here with us today. We're pleased about that. And I want to say cheers and ask you to all sit
Cheers.
back and enjoy the your own cocktail for this program. Take it away, guys, gals.
My name is Kyle Jolliffe. I live in Toronto, Canada. I'm an inveterate postcard collector. I've given several Zoom meeting presentations on various topics for the Wichita Postcard Club. These can be found on the club's YouTube channel. I've also attended 4 of the annual Wichita Postcard Club shows, including this year. Some of the cards shown today were purchased at these shows. My collection includes hundreds of interior views of New York City bar and restaurant cards acquired over 25 years. Almost all of them are devoid of the staff and patrons of these establishments, which to me is an interesting conscious choice by the creators of these cards. I met Diane through the Facebook group Collectors of Vintage Linen Postcards. Diane and Ann Peck Davis are the authors of the book Cocktails Across America, a postcard view of cocktail culture in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. This book is available on Amazon and at your favorite bookseller. So I suggested to Diane that I combine my New York City bar and restaurant cards that show bartenders with her focus on cocktail culture. The result of this collaboration is today's exceptional presentation, which is divided into 3 parts: men behind the bar, people of color behind the bar, and women behind or in front of the bar. Diane, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Kyle. So I'm Diane Lapis, and I've also been a collector for over 40 years. And I met Anne through our children. We both collect similar linen postcard images, and we said, hey, let's write a book about it because we enjoyed traveling back in time and thinking about what it was like during the golden age of the cocktail era, where you could enjoy a cocktail, wear a fancy dress, listen to jazz. So we combined our collections of linen postcards and told the stories of cocktail culture from the post-prohibition era. And we put it into a book called Cocktails Across America, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end of the presentation. And thanks to seeing Kyle's amazing linen postcard view images that he posts on Facebook, I would always say, never saw that one, love that one. And that's how we became Facebook friends. And his idea to talk about the people behind the bar was a really fascinating study. So I'm looking forward to sharing the information that we gleaned from this project.
The cards in this presentation show bartending as a profession, the different styles of bars, the types of drinks served, the uniforms bartenders wear. There's an emphasis on purity, so generally bartenders wear white uniforms, and the gender roles of the bartenders and the customers. But these varied cards also depict and/or reflect a number of things. Firstly, changes over time in cultural roles for women and African Americans. Secondly, that women won the right to vote through the 19th Amendment that went into force in 1920, and also the right to be bartenders. Thirdly, that women were escorted or separated in bars. Fourthly, the social ritual of drinking alcohol, which stimulates endorphins that produce happiness and well-being, as well as social bonds between those who indulge together. Fifthly, advertising images, sometimes humorous or gimmicky. And sixthly and lastly, changes over time in the types of postcards produced pre-linen, linen, chrome, and real photo cards, and in postcard image formats, as seen in artist-drawn cards, comic cards, and multi-panel layouts. The card shown on the screen now is of the American Cafe at 42nd and 8th Avenue in New York City. Dates from 1912. That's the year it was mailed. This is a rare card. I've only seen it once in 20 years, and of course I purchased it then. Has an advertising purpose. It's near Times Square, probably aimed more at local customers than tourists. It has a social history content with the white uniforms of the waiters and bartenders, separate rooms for men and ladies, and a long stand-up bar. It also shows a strong entrepreneurial pride, showing the owners or the managers and the waiters and the bartending staff. In this card, all these features attractively combine to create a welcoming spirit for customers.
So this is not an exhaustive study, but just a sampling of postcards of Kyle's collection and my own. First, I'd like to introduce you to Jerry Thomas, who is considered the father of American mixology due to his pioneering work in popularizing cocktails. He published the first cocktail book in the US in 1862 that included directions for mixing spirits and creating cordials. Many of these recipes were used by homemakers for flavoring food, treating disease, and promoting health. His signature drink was the Blue Blazer, made by lighting whiskey afire and passing it back and forth between two mixing glasses, as you can see in the illustration in the left corner. When he worked at the Occidental Hotel in San Francisco, he earned $100 a week, which is over $3,100 today. Thomas displayed creativity and showmanship, such as wearing flashy jewelry while juggling bottles and cups, paving the way for the professional bartender. As European immigrants settled in large cities, such as New York, a wide variety of intercontinental restaurants opened, such as the Café Alt Nuremberg. The German-style foods and beer they served became part of mainstream American cuisine. While we don't know about the individuals represented in the postcards, we can share a bit about the restaurants and the patrons that they served. La Maison Française was a building at Rockefeller Center designed to promote international trade and provide a home for the French consulate alongside other large French companies. The building was designed in the Art Deco style by Raymond Hood and nearly identical to the British Empire and the International Building in the same complex. The namesake restaurant featured French regional specialties, as described in the mid-1930s menu, such as escargot, crepes, and entrees are originating from the famed Rector's and Delmonico's restaurants. Edward Levine, the founder of the Brass Rail, ran 5 restaurants in Manhattan and Brooklyn. The Brass Rail was famous for their window display of chefs carving hot meats, as seen in the postcard on the right. Jack Levine is right here in the center, was quite the entrepreneur. He ran the food service at Jones Beach State Park, Kennedy Airport, 5 restaurants at the 1939-40 World's Fair, and a snack bar at the 64-65 Fair. Guests at this 49th Street venue were able to choose from 4 distinctly different dining experiences: the Cocktail Lounge, the Sea Grill, the London Grill, and the Continental for both dining and dancing. Possibly named for a village in the Portofino coast in Italy, Mario's Villa Rapallo transported guests to the Italian Riviera. The waiters and bartenders are elegantly dressed in white jackets and black bow ties, adding to the sophisticated ambiance. Notice the quintessential wall mural depicting a scene from Italy on the right. Each circle on the clock of the matchbook cover says cheers in different languages. The Russian Tea Room opened in 1926 by members of the Russian Imperial Ballet who fled to America during the Revolution. A series of 4 postcards illustrated by D. Burgess captures the bustling environment of the Russian tea room mid-century. Each card and accompanying matchbook cover features a bright yellow block of color, making these cards a standout. The bartender here carries on with his duties, while fellow barmaids look askance at the straw-guzzling gentleman in black. Keene's Chop House occupied 3 old brownstones in Manhattan. Different postcards from the restaurant advertised their impressive collection of church warden pipes on display, donated to them by their guests. One card indicated that 15,000 pipes were on display, and a later card noted 20,000. A collection of playbills also decorated the walls. The tap room postcard was illustrated by John Stanley Walsh, a noted Canadian artist. He was born in England in 1907 and studied art there. In 1940, he was posted to Canada by the British Admiralty and eventually settled in Montreal. Widely known as a painter of night and day scenes in Canada's urban landscape, his illustrations and travel writing were published in the Ford Times magazine. I don't have much information on the Greensleeves restaurant, but I do appreciate the 60s vibe countered with the colonial chairs. And notice the bartender is wearing green sleeves. Opposite Penn Station, since 1918, Soloway's oversized menu advertised that it never closed. The drink special in a 1957 menu offered either Israeli sacramental wine for 35 cents or a king-size martini for 55. The bartenders are in their traditional white uniform, while the waitress seen off to the right, far right corner, are wearing colorful outfits. This New York City restaurant on 53rd and 3rd transported one away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It featured colorful murals throughout, including this map and 2 walls depicting a tranquil scene of a bay with sailboats. Do you notice the lack of bar stools at this bar? I wonder if the bartender was lonely or happy not to have to converse with the patrons. Bright colors and dramatic diagonal lines make this an eye-catching linen. This air-cooled restaurant and bar featured 2 orchestras nightly. The jazz band, swanky dinner guests, and bar patrons contrast in time with the old-timey brewer in the upper left corner and the horse-drawn wagon featured below the restaurant's name. In the late 1800s to early 1900s, many American breweries used draft horses like Clydesdales to pull beer from brew houses to public houses. When Prohibition ended, Budweiser, in celebration, used Clydesdale horses and wagons as a marketing tool. They even sent a team of horses and barrels of beer to Franklin D. Roosevelt at the White House to thank him for signing repeal into law. Bull and Bear restaurant serves steak and English specialties. They offer complimentary limo service to the theater district after dinner. Doesn't look like a very friendly place for women. Now, the Roseland Ballroom, there is a lot of history written about it, but in some, it first opened in 1919 and started as an all-white dance hall with entertainment by society orchestras. By the late 20s and 30s, the hall featured the big band sounds of Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, and the Fletcher Henderson Band. This venue remained a dance hall until 2014, with Lady Gaga being the last headliner. The 5 o'clock club was so named as it would provide free drinks to those patrons that were there at the bar at 5 in the morning. Most likely after-work waiters, waitresses, and musicians from other clubs, an occasional hooker, and sometimes a celebrity or 2. It was noted that one should nurse the cocktail and never order food from what was considered one of the worst kitchens on the beach. The Click Club on Market Street was an important venue during the 1940s and 50s. Benny Goodman, Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong, the Clooney sisters, and comedians and other entertainers performed there. A nightly radio series broadcast concerts from the club, many of which were later released as albums. In the 50s and 60s, the banquet hall was a popular place for social groups, family celebrations, and special events due to their reasonable prices and variety of entertainment. I imagine the bartenders did well at the Click Club with the hordes of patrons. While we may never know who the bartenders are in the cards that we shared, real photo postcards found in local historical societies or in private collectors' hands might open the door to learning about the people behind the bar. In this real photo postcard example from the Beacon Historical Society, of which I'm a member and trustee, the local historians, I am the local historian, did some research into the clues found on the front and back of the card. We see Peter Dittman at Marianne's rooming house on the corner of Walcott and Tyrone Avenue. We know from the census that Mr. Dittman worked at the Timony brickyards and was perhaps making ends meet during the winter months when the brickyards were closed. Looking closely at the card, we see the calendar open to November 1908 and a little gnome hiding behind the curtain. Can you see his little nose and beard? We see horseshoe upturned, which is representing of good luck, a bottle of Erie Club beer, and a spittoon on the footrest of the bar. The back of the card indicates that the photo was taken at 10:45 on November 08, with a number of erased mathematical problems, possibly figures of how old a person is, such as 1910 minus 1886 equals 24. Before we move on to the next section about women and people of color behind the bar, I thought it would be fun to throw in some superlative cards. One way to stand out amongst the multitude of bars and restaurants was by being competitive, the best, the biggest, the tallest. Bradley's 5 and 10 was a watering hole on Fillmore Street in San Francisco, the bar measuring 167 feet long. Frank Bradley enjoyed superlatives and boasted the tallest and shortest bartenders on earth. Hank measuring 7'8" and Terry 4'11". It's fun to see the bartenders standing in full dress. Usually one only sees bartenders behind the bar. The 5 and 10 refers to the prices on the menu. You could get a hot dog for a nickel and a glass of beer for a dime. It was no secret that the more salty food served, the greater consumption of alcohol. Quote, from high silk hat to working cap, unquote, was Bradley's motto. The Mexicali Beer Hall in Tijuana was considered the longest bar in the world at that time at 229 feet. The beer hall was popular amongst Americans during Prohibition as Tijuana was so close to the US border. It closed in the mid-30s and later turned into a Woolworth's store. Sloppy Joe's Bar in Havana was a place to see and be seen for Americans during Prohibition. Notice that both men and women are served at the bar. It held the moniker for the longest bar in Latin America at 60 feet. Named after the sandwich it served and the messiness of the place, Sloppy Joe's was frequented by the likes of Ernest Hemingway, John Wayne, Clark Gable, and other popular stars of the day in the 1930s. We know a little bit about the owner and head bartender of Sloppy Joe's. His name was Jose Garcia, who arrived in Cuba from Spain in 1904. He worked as a barman in Havana, New Orleans, and Miami for a period of about 15 years and returned to Havana before opening Sloppy Joe's. The bar closed in 1959 at the end of the Cuban Revolution. Now, you may have noticed that the cards presented so far did not include the faces of people of color. It's no surprise that there's a dearth in this area. The history of Black bartenders was difficult to uncover as little was written about them in the newspapers. Cocktail historians have uncovered the stories of 11 Black men who were successful and influential behind the bar before Prohibition. These men were wealthy and owned their own businesses and property. There are also stories of Black bartenders full of violence and hardship fueled by racism. For the purposes of this presentation, we are fast forwarding to the early 20th century to show people of color behind the bar or a lack thereof through postcards. So earlier I introduced to you Jerry Thomas, the father of mixology, at the beginning of the presentation. And here is Tom Bullock from the 20th century, who worked at the Pendennis Club in Louisville, Kentucky, just before Prohibition. He authored the Ideal Bartender Recipe book published in 1917. The book was singular in that it did not include replicas of other recipes, only those of Bullock's invention. He was embraced by the white community as evidenced by the fact that George Herbert Walker, grandfather of former President George H.W. Bush, wrote the introduction of the book. And as I mentioned, it was difficult to find postcards with people of color behind or in front of a bar post-Prohibition. This first one I'd like to share is a linen train card showing a Black porter. After the Civil War, the Pullman Company hired African-American men who were former slaves to work as porters on the Transcontinental Railroad. George Pullman believed that the former slaves would be used to the subservient role of serving white passengers their every whim. After the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters unionized in 1925, porters started wearing uniforms and were trained in the fine preparation and serving of cocktails, such as, quote, restraining the rotation of the wrist instead of wild shaking. Opportunities to work as a Pullman porter enabled many to achieve middle-class status and be respected in the position of bartender. At O'Brien's restaurant in Waverly, New York, This was the only restaurant in the North employing Tuskegee Institute students on a part-time basis. Students alternated 3 months of practical work at O'Brien's and 3 months of study at Tuskegee. I'm assuming that bartending was one of the skills taught at O'Brien's. And Kyle is going to talk about this card.
Yeah. The Hampton House Motel was a two-story, 50-room motel in Miami that operated between the 1950s and 1970s. It hosted many prominent African-American politicians and performers such as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Sammy Davis, Josephine Baker, Ella Fitzgerald, and Aretha Franklin. It was listed in the Green Book published between the 1930s and the late 1960s as a safe space that provided food and lodging for African Americans in segregated southern Florida before the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was saved from demolition in the early 2000s and restored. It is now a very active African American cultural center and museum known as the Historic Hampton House. Back to you, Diane.
Thank you, Kyle. The Myers Plantation Inn card shows a costume waiter serving rum, while in the back we see white-coated bartenders against the back wall. And in the Palmer House card, we see an African-American waiter wearing the traditional garb of waitstaff, while in a finer uniform, the tuxedoed host greets and seats the all-white customers. I had more luck finding postcards that featured Black bartenders on cards outside of the US. For example, in the card of the 21 Club in Bermuda. At the turn of the century, J.E. Lightbourne and Company, a wine and spirit merchant, operated a storefront on the ground floor of the building, and the second floor was utilized as a whiskey warehouse. In the 1940s, the second floor was changed to a bar called the 21 Club. Originally exclusively for men, it was an upscale drinking establishment frequented by the high society figures of the time. This bar incorporates the tiki elements popular in the 50s and 60s, but here we see traditional Fijian art, such as wood carving and woven mats from palm fronds. Fiji was at the crossroads of the Pacific and was an important refueling stop, so one might have the chance to relax at the tiki bar before heading back to North America or Europe. The last section of the program will reflect on women behind the bar. We see through the mid-1880s, women were allowed to be engaged in the tavern trade as a tavern keeper or a barmaid. Social constructs during the Victorian and then the Edwardian era created barriers for proper women to tend or enter a tavern or bar. Postcards from the early 1900s depict women sexually objectified and stylized, as shown in these two images. Since women were not allowed in the saloons, taverns, or lounges that men attended at the turn of the century, women hosted tea parties and luncheons in their own homes. They were inexpensive, easy to organize, prepare, and serve. They followed etiquette guides and recipe books, such as the Contemporary Library of Modern Cooking and Household Recipes by Christine Herrick. It was one of the first comprehensive drinks guides written by and for women. A popular drink served at the tea parties was the wine cup, a low alcoholic beverage that could be easily embellished with fruits and herbs. Over time, women took the lead in serving up a variety of cocktails from home, even in teacups during Prohibition. Let's see. Cookbooks by African Americans also shared recipes for preparing spirits. Shortly after Herrick's books were published, Rufus Estes' guide included recipes based on food he served and created throughout his career as a Pullman porter, starting in 1883, and then as a chef for U.S. Steel Corporation. The book includes recipes for raspberry and currant shrub. Eliza's cookbook on the left consisted of recipes contributed by the Negro Culinary Club members, including upscale ladies' luncheon and cocktail recipes. Then this 1910 anti-suffragette postcard shows two women imbibing at the bar. Notice the bartender's disdain as he looks down his nose at the duo. Consider that from 1893 to 1933, the Anti-Saloon League was a major force in American politics, who created a moral crusade against the manufacture, sale, and consumption of alcohol into the Prohibition Amendment of the United States Constitution. Cards depicting women at the bar are scarce at best. This is one of my favorite cocktail postcards. The multi-view layout, the colors, the topic meet my highest expectations for a linen card of this genre. The Cohasset Punch was created in the late 1890s, bottled, sold, and served over a brandied peach, first at Williams and Newman's Saloon in Chicago, and then later at Ladner Brothers. The production of this rum-based punch continued until 1989, and I'm going to bring your attention to this, what looks like a smudge on the back wall of the bar. So as I mentioned, the rum-based punch was made until 1989. Then in 2019, Greg Shutters, a Chicago-based cocktail history enthusiast, became interested in the story of the Cohasset Punch after seeing it listed on a variety of vintage menus. After researching and discovering that the trademark for the cherry red punch was defunct, he reverse engineered it and began manufacturing it in 2023. A more detailed history about it is in our book, Cocktails Across America. Now, I bring this to your attention because it was Greg who shared with me this 1943 photo that he accessed from the Newberry Library Kurt Teich archives of the linen postcard. It is here what you can see the sign that looked like a smudge, and I enlarged it over here to say unescorted ladies served at tables only, and illustrating what was inherent in society about what women could or could not do. And before I go on, I would just want to show you the bottle that Greg recreated, the Cohasset Punch, beautiful graphics, and the cherry red color punch in the classic glass. But I'm bringing that up because of the sign that blew me away when I saw the unescorted ladies. During the war, women took over the role of bartenders until the men returned home from the war. Then hotel and restaurant unions reclaimed the profession of bartending for men, turning back the clock on women in that profession. The union claimed that women were unbecoming behind the bar and not suited to the rigors it required. It was also considered un-American. In 1940, only 3% of the bartending profession were women. In places like Chicago, Detroit, and Brooklyn, women were barred from working behind the bar. And it wasn't until 1971 in California that women could actually work behind the bar. Today, women account for over 60% of professional bartenders across the USA. In this postcard, the Dan and Lewis Oyster Bar, it was a family-run operation, and it's actually still in existence today. I would take a guess that the women behind the bar were family members, and it's really one of the few postcards where you see women working behind the bar. Typical of seafood restaurants across the city, restaurateurs depended on fish from the Chesapeake, Long Island, or New England. One can see the sign in the back that touts Maine lobsters. This is a rare view of women behind the bar, although I'm not certain if they're waitresses or bartenders. One way women could get behind a bar was pretend. Studios were set up with bar, saloon backdrops in places like Coney Island and Times Square. One could bartend and take home a real photo postcard as a souvenir. Women at the bar were portrayed as buffoonish and as sexist cartoon characters. The comic card on the left came in a series of women dressed in different outfits, such as a cowgirl or in a business suit, each time showing her undergarment being, quote, knocked off. Other cards show women in a misogynist way, like these two linen postcards. Most often, women are depicted in roles of servers, hostesses, or waitresses. In the 1940s, over 20 Sheraton hotel lounges across the country employed service aides that kept popcorn bowls filled and ashtrays clean while providing a seamless supply of cocktails to the male guests. The mastermind behind these winsome women was Mrs. Edna Gilbert. She was hired by the Sheraton chain with a promise to increase sales by 70% with her team of glamorous hostesses. Each was trained in how to walk, speak, dress, style hair, and apply makeup. Mrs. Gilbert created the diaphanous gowns worn by the hostesses, who had to fit a particular size and age requirement. If married, they needed written permission from their husband. The women earned between $80 to $200 a week, or about $800 to $1,800 today. Postcards, matches, and swizzle sticks were giveaways featuring the alluring fancy frocked maids to remind guests of their high-class evening out on the town. U.S. Airlines didn't serve alcohol in flight until the 1940s. Because of conflicting state liquor laws, drinks could be served only when flying over certain states. They couldn't be served on Sundays, election days, and other holidays, and specific hours in some states. By the mid-1950s, the FAA imposed a 2-drink limit, but some passengers skirted that by intimidating flight attendants or wrangling drinks from other passengers. Like the service aides at the Sheraton, the flight attendants were required to meet certain requirements for body measurements and age, also retiring by age 32. Only single, divorced, or widowed women, and not pregnant, were allowed to serve. One needed to appear, quote, available and desirable to the male passengers, which accounted for 80% of those flying. Our final cards show women as servers. Black women rarely worked in white restaurants, except if they were dressed in mammy costumes like the card on the left. The back of the old Southern tea room postcard states, quote, with its colored waitresses in bright mammy costumes serving steam, shrimp gumbo, etc. The waitress at the Sweden House is wearing an alluring decorative costume to match the theme of the restaurant. In my mind, these women are no different than the Sheraton ladies or stewardesses dressed up to entice customers in the door and to increase food and drink sales. A search on eBay showed no postcards of women of color behind the bar or as cocktail servers. While cocktails have always been a quick and easy way to communicate to each other, they remain souvenirs capturing moments in our history. The cards presented here today are just a sampling of the occupational aspect of the restaurant industry in mid-century America, while capturing the social and cultural norms of its day. And that concludes today's program. And this is a cover of the book Cocktails Across America that my friend Anne and I created, that uses hundreds of postcards, images with over 50 recipes and vignettes about cocktail culture. And you can reach us today in Cocktail History or at Cocktails Across America on Instagram. And we're ready for any questions that we have. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, thanks so much, both of you. You just did a wonderful job, and I'm just amazed at the variety and, the little fine points that you were looking at as collectors, going through boxes of cards and maybe only finding one or two that fit in some of your categories. It was great.
Yes, we're a little short on items here, but Betty Drake popped in and said she changed her background, and for that I thank you. Jim Potter says hello from Reno. I'm interested in more uniforms in the New York nightclub scene at the Silver Slipper. Do you have any postcards of the Silver Slipper, especially from the 1920s?
No, where was the Silver Slipper? Did you say New York City?
Apparently, it's a New York club.
Oh,
I don't have any of that. Never seen any.
Have you
and
even
they
heard of
were
it?
in uniform in World War I uniforms? Like what is he saying?
I think what he's looking for is post-World War I uniforms worn by the staff at the club. Now, whether that's a bar or a restaurant with a bar, I don't know. Jim Potter, are you on here?
Yeah, I didn't say anything about uniforms. You must have that kind of mixed with another one. I was looking for information on the Silver Slipper. It was in New York City around 48th Street and Broadway in Manhattan. it was known as one of the clubs that got a lot of its liquor illegally, and it was closed down, I know, for a time, padlocked because of it being a speakeasy, selling illegal out during Prohibition. But I was especially interested in a postcard from the 1920s. At this point, I guess I'll be lucky to get a postcard from any era.
Had you ever seen one before?
I saw one online, yes,
Mm.
but it wasn't for sale. It was just something I saw on Instagram.
I see. I wonder if
Yeah,
Anne, if Anne,
Prohibition killed so many postcards because it killed so many restaurants.
Jim, you were right. I don't know where I came up with the question of the uniforms. Um,
Well, one more comment. It also put a lot of pressure on the ocean liners that were crossing the pond, because the foreign ships, like the British ships, their ocean cruisers could sell alcohol.
Mhm.
And the United States couldn't even have alcohol on the ship because it was considered part of the United States. And the ocean liners really complained about that and really hurt them a lot.
Well, they did change the ruling that after 3 miles and then 12 miles, they were out to sea, they were allowed to serve alcohol after a certain
thought-
time.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know when they did that?
I don't recall. It wasn't right away. It was after 1919. I don't remember the exact date, but it was a little bit after that because of those complaints.
Great. Thank you.
And there were 2 cocktails named after that, the 3-mile limit and the 12-mile limit.
Great.
Thank
Which
you,
was
Ally.
stronger? Do we know which one was stronger?
I think they were both pretty strong.
Oh, it's nice to see one of the restaurants was the King of the Sea you had on over in Second Avenue. When I was growing up, we used to go there maybe twice a month.
Really?
Yeah, and my parents went there, started going there in the 30s, and a lot of the waitresses were the same as back then. So we're talking late 50s and really early 60s that I remember it well. And there was one waitress who had flaming red hair and always had her big red corsage.
Oh,
And my father always had a martini and a plate of Blue Points. But what I really remember about it was in the men's room down in the basement, they took the crushed ice that the fish came in and threw it in the urinals. And so I was just, without becoming overly graphic, was just entranced by that. I spent a great deal of time, needless to say, in the basement melting ice, as my sister used to say.
that is a great story. That's so great. Do you
The-
remember the
The
murals?
term TMI, I think, should probably have been used here. But thanks, Rick.
Do you remember
Oh.
the murals in the King of the Sea?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember the murals in the King of the Sea, the map and the?
I remember them vaguely. I think in the back by the bar.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very vague. I just remember the tables were all round, and most of the staff had been there for many, many, many years.
Wow.
And I just remember this one waitress with always a new corsage on her, on her uniform.
That's a great story.
Daniel Sachs asks, where do you think bars would have their postcards placed for customers to pick up? Can you expand on that a little bit, Dan?
Well, I can understand a hotel or a restaurant, where hotels are going to have gift shops. Restaurants will have a hostess or a host station. But bars, you just walk in and out. And so where we're at a bar, just have a stack of postcards available for customers to grab.
Well, I always
on the
imagine it.
bar or
Yeah,
or
I always imagine it
cloakroom.
by a cash register where you see them today. Like if you go into a diner,
yeah.
get matchbooks, or some often
Yeah.
sell postcards. It would be near
But-
the cash register, but
Yeah.
A
So
lot of the transactions-
some of them say hand them back to the waiter and it will be mailed for free.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that in restaurants. It just occurred to me, you're in a bar, you're sitting at the bar, the transaction, the cash transaction is usually directly with the bartender. Like, would they have, I was just wondering, would they have a stack of postcards behind the bar and you say, hey, give me one of them postcards?
Or
I'm
maybe
gonna
when
mail
they
it to
got their
somebody.
change, when they
Oh,
would receive their
yeah,
change, they would be
maybe.
handed a postcard
Yeah.
as they left.
I just thought it never occurred to me until I saw your program. Like, we all see these postcards all, for sale all the time, but where were they actually put on display in the business for
Mm.
people to take?
They must have been distributed for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Robert Bell says, we have a presentation a while ago about religious and color persecution on hotel postcards. Did you find anything about this as well? For example, comments about Christian atmosphere or something. I'm not altogether sure what you mean, Robert.
Yes, could he
Yeah,
explain that?
there was some of the cards, emphasized, they used sort of coded wording that, they didn't want Jews or colored people coming in, and they were careful to, we, in a presentation talked about how some of the coding, some of it was quite explicit, but some of it was sort of coded. Did you run into that with bars as well, or probably not, but I was just curious.
I only on the backs of cards that they would say things like the colored waitresses or things like that. But
Yeah, it was on the back of
the,
cards
the
where they had
Jewish
it in
the
little.
Jewish cards would, say, Jewish owned or Hebrew, kosher food served. That was not really coded because that was right out there.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
but-
usually coded against them when they had it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah, I'm not aware of any cards that I've come across like that for restaurant and bars.
So Diane, you just said that the cards on the back would make it explicit that they were that Jews were welcome or something like that.
Right, like say
That's an unusual way of approaching it.
there, I think like Gluckstern's in San Francisco, I think that's one of the cards where it says kosher food served. That would be a giveaway that that would be a safe place to eat, or that you could get a kosher meal.
Huh.
I wouldn't say that you couldn't go if you weren't Jewish, but it would be a welcoming place.
That's rather interesting.
Well, I mean, it says on one of the Gluckstern cards for New York City, on Excel for gefulte stuffed fish, kreplach soup, kishka, and homemade apple strudel.
You're killing those words, Kyle.
I apologize to all all my Jewish colleagues.
Okay, it's kreplach and gefilte fish. Oh, and it was in New York, not San Francisco.
Yeah.
I think it was Bernstein's in San Francisco or somewhere in California.
Ann Davis picks up on what we were talking about before, and she says many of the cards were just giveaways, but that still doesn't answer the question where they were. Anything further, Ann?
I can only guess that they were probably behind the bar or by the cash register. And when you were leaving, you would be given a card, because we found so many cards that there was no writing on the back. They were like mint. So we could only think that, they were giving the cards to the customer. They had it behind the bar is what I would think. They weren't for sale. In my opinion, it was just for advertising.
Mhm.
They either hoped that you would write a message and send it to your friend. And this way your friend would say, oh, well, maybe, here's one actually. Your friend would say, oh, maybe when I'm in that area, I want to go to that place as well. So I think they weren't really for sale, but they were just, maybe at the receptionist, just almost like now when you go to a restaurant or even sometimes to a bar, there's somebody at the front desk and you could get a toothpick or sometimes a matchbook, and sometimes even an advertisement to this day. So I think that's why there's so many of them, because people pick them up for free.
I mean,
Is
these
what I
were,
think, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kyle, but I did have one more point, and that is that you were talking about the silver slipper. I actually thought I might have a card, but I don't. I have the Silver Lounge, and that one was at the Marlboro Blenheim in Atlantic City that was just imploded, not too long ago. And that one is, very Art Deco, beautiful card.
Mm.
So I'll keep my eyes open for the silver slipper, but I wanted to say I'm very impressed with the cards that you presented. It's a beautiful collection. The information, and research you did is remarkable. There's so much to have learned from all these details in these little pictures of who was behind the bar and, the notations or the objects behind the bar is really is stupendous. So I think there are a lot of people in the bar industry that would be extremely interested in all the information that you compiled.
Thank you, Anne.
Bravo, bravo.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, Betty Drake says, I saw an online post that talked about postcards being near the restroom.
Yeah. This,
How did that come out, Betty?
I just Googled it, and this one person said that they had like a little plastic display stand where you could pick up a postcard coming or going to the restroom.
That was a popular place to find them during the rack card craze.
Yeah.
They were, on the walls,
Mhm.
going in or out or in those areas. I wanted to say about, thinking about what's available today that is no longer. What about were there ever any postcards? Did anyone ever see one for Playboy clubs all over the country? I've seen the magazine, but I don't remember even matchbooks for Playboy clubs. But maybe I'm just
I've seen Playboy bunny postcards over the years. I've never purchased them, but I have seen that.
have you?
That
Okay.
would be an interesting collection.
Yeah, it would be.
Got just a quick question here, Hal.
Yes.
The term cocktail, Diane, do you know the origin of that term, cocktail?
Well, there are origin stories about it, and maybe Anne, who has a better memory than me, could answer that. Anne, could I put you on the spot about the story of the cocktail?
There has been a lot of information about that, and there's a famous cocktail historian, David Wondrich, who has a theory, and it's actually a little bit disturbing and unpleasant, but he said that he said, and it's documented in his information, that in his research, he found that a cocktail was something that was actually put up a horse's butt to get the horse moving. So that's the unfortunate graphic detail. He says that's the origin of it from years ago. But I don't really know that they're constantly, these historians, tracking down old newspaper articles to see when it was first used, when the term was first used, and I think they tracked it down now to
1839.
the 1800s, before Jerry Thomas's book. But I will say this about it is that, one time you had a drink, at any time of the day, even with breakfast, and, it was a pick me up. There's a whole line of, drinks in old cocktail books called pick me up or corpse reviver. You're not feeling well. You overdid it. Here, have this drink. So there were drinks for every kind of reason. And for any time of the day. So, you know, I always think of the term cocktail as like something that's going to get you going or make you feel better. If you have a stomach ailment, if you have arthritis, like that, they really were categorized for medicinal purposes as well.
I
Does not
remember hearing
designate.
people would have a Bloody Mary with like their scrambled eggs at breakfast. It was a great way to start the day or take care of what you did the night before, you know, the hangover.
Mm-hmm.
And a Bloody Mary with a bunch of Tabasco sauce in it or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Kyle or Diane, do you have any postcards that show bar cars on the railroad, the commuters particularly? That was a big deal with the Long
Yeah.
Island Railroad going home from a day's work in the city, New York.
I don't,
I
I've
don't.
never seen the Long Island Railroad ones, but there are a number of bar car, you know, transcontinental bar cars that actually Ann and I were talking about doing a program about. There's a good story there.
Can I quickly show one? I
Sure.
mean, I don't know,
please.
this isn't
Yeah.
the Long Island Railroad, but this is,
It's 400.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of them for the railroad and they're beautiful. I think you had
What?
one in the presentation.
Hold
Yeah.
it a wee bit higher.
Oh, yeah, I just want to, oh, this is the Chicago and Northwestern line. Is it, can you see it or no?
It's okay.
It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that's a linen. I actually, I'm thumbing through my book right now to try to find all the things that you're talking about to show examples.
Yeah, Ann and I have a number of railroad cards showing, because we collect anything that shows cocktails or the serving of drinks. So we do have a number of railroad cards, airplane cards. We're also interested in airplane history and serving food at airports, food and drink at airports and on airlines. So
Yeah,
any form
I
of
want
travel.
to show one card which I omitted sending to Diane. I was telling her about it earlier today. It's for a restaurant in Chinatown, New York City, and actually shows them holding drinking glasses
Oh
and
my God,
advertising
Kyle.
wine and liquor. So I apologize profusely, Diana, that I missed sending this one to you, but it's a beauty. It's a beauty.
That's a beauty. I love that.
It's a beauty.
Yeah.
You'll get a scan of it.
Thank you. I would have loved to put that in the program. I mean, I
Yeah,
couldn't,
so-
I searched through eBay as an example under Chinese restaurants and found no women, you know, no women waiters or bartenders. So that is a beautiful.
Yeah, it's really hard to see the glasses that they're holding in their hands, and
Alan M. And I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, Alan.
Man.
Okay. Points out that there are different designs of cocktail shakers.
Mm-hmm.
So such as.
Well, I'm sure in the USA you have like antique road shows and the like on various broadcasting companies. We have them here in the UK as well, and it's surprising how ornate and Art Deco type of cocktail shakers don't fetch a fair amount of money, but there's cocktail shakers that were designed for particular bars as well, and also the kind of cocktail sticks that they're extremely collectible as well, that have the bar name on it and everything
Swizzle
like
sticks,
that.
you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
stirrer sticks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if they appeared on postcards or you can identify them in the background like you have done in some of those postcards.
You know, interesting. Usually you don't see the bartenders at work. They're just standing there. They're not like doing anything. So it's hard to see the tools that they used.
Yeah.
But there is a whole history of cocktail shakers, and they became really prominent during Prohibition for sale at home because people were serving, you know, cocktails at home. and they needed the tools. And especially when, was it the hammered steel, or what is that, Anne, that we like to collect? That lightweight aluminum, the hammered aluminum products that were available and affordable for home use. You would see the beginnings of different cocktail shaker styles.
I just wanted to add a little bit to the cocktail shaker discussion, and that is the big companies in America that produced it were Chromecraft.
Chrome, that's right.
And also Farberware. So, if you look at some of the old cocktail shakers that they have for sale in flea markets or vintage stores in America, the manufacturer would be Chromecraft or Farberware, generally. And they were gorgeous. Beautiful.
Jim Potter, you were trying to show something on the screen.
Yeah, I was just trying to test to see if something on my phone could show up on the screen, but I think it's going to be too small. It was an article from the New York Times from 2014 saying that, or 2016 saying that the Metro North was going to get some old time cafe cars, also known as bar cars, back in service.
Yeah.
And there's a picture here that I can try to show, but I'm just afraid it's too small. It shows a car all with men in their business suits and ties, most of them reading the paper, and half of them have drinks in their hands. I'll try to put it up there, but it looks like it's too small.
What was the name of the article, Jim?
It was in the New York Times. They were talking about getting bar cars back. I'll try, but I think it's too small.
You said it 4 times.
Oh,
There-
no, there you are. Wow.
Oh, that's
Wow.
cool.
Cool.
After a hard day's work.
Betty Davis takes us back to the discussion of jackalope postcards and says there's says for our information, the title of a jackalope postcard is Mocky Mountain Rack
Yeah,
Jabbit.
Mocky Rountain Rack Jabbit.
Thank you for
They
catching that.
reversed the spelling on it.
Yeah. What is that was just it's a humorous card?
It's a photo postcard by Carl Gillespie of a jackalope sitting out in the middle of, the scrub brush. So it says shot near the leaky roof 6 miles from Butte by Carl Gillespie.
Sounds like Montana.
Yep. Just because we were talking about jackalopes. Part of the fan club.
Okay, over to you, Hal.
Well, we do thank our presenters once again, and for you too, Bill Burton, for helping us today. And think it's been fun, and cheers. And
Here's to
for our
you,
next
Hal.
Postcard
Here you
Club
go.
meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you.
Don't forget to finish
Thank
it
you.
off,
Well
Hal.
done.
There you go.